Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Cream City Cast. This is CreamCityCentral.com's weekly podcast discussing the latest in the Milwaukee Bucks and giving you the latest going on in Milwaukee. Our podcast is brought to you by the Shepherd Express. You can check them out at shepherdexpress.com. Here with Andrew Goodman once again, and then also joined by fellow Bucks writer at Cream City Central, Alex Juno. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with me right now.
Glad to
Absolutely.
be here.
Awesome. Andrew, do you want to just give a little rundown of what happened this weekend?
Yeah, Bucks finishing up a 3-1 week, all things considered, pretty good. They had wins at Sacramento and then a very impressive win at Portland against the Blazers. Then they also wrapped it up with a home win against the Kings, and then they traveled to Boston, where they lost to the Celtics last night, 110-100. My MVP for the Bucks this week is definitely going to be Eric Bledsoe. Eric Bledsoe had a fantastic week on both sides of the ball, and what really stood out to me was the defense he played against Damian Lillard in Portland. His lateral quickness is unparalleled, and he just brings so much to the Bucks on both ends of the floor. So I'm going to dish it off to you, Al. Who's your Bucks MVP for the week?
I think Bledsoe's a pretty good choice. I think he would probably be mine as well. He not only kind of gave the clamps to Damian Lillard, but he really made De'Aaron Fox work in both of the matchups with the Kings this week. I know a lot of people were like, oh, Eric Bledsoe can't shoot after his first 6 games here. And it's like, yeah, the guy who's been in the NBA for 7 years will probably get back to his numbers for his career. And that's what we've kind of seen this last week. He's just regressing back to his career averages.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you also. I mean, I have to go with Bledsoe. In his last couple games, he's just been actually just dominating offensively. He's been making impacts all over the court offensively. And you're right, defensively against Damian Lillard, you can't really ask for anything more. And if he gives you defense every night and he gives you 15, 16 on offense, then that's what we got him for. And I think that's what role he should be playing every night. And it's really about consistency with him.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to get into our little Buck segment here. I guess we should just start with kind of the hot stove, if you will. A lot of rumors last week about DeAndre Jordan and what we think about him. A lot of negative. We don't really want him because of the price tag that they're asking, but I wanted to get your guys' opinions. Al, can I start with you? What do you think about DeAndre?
I'm kind of in the it doesn't matter what we would have to give up for DeAndre. I don't really want him. I think he definitely upgrades the center position, but I think in an NBA where we're seeing the center position shrink year after year, it doesn't make sense to give up anything for a guy who would probably be a rental at center. And if he wasn't, I would not be interested in paying him what he's going to want long term. Even though he would make the team better in the short run and maybe even the long run, I don't think it's wise to commit big money to a center. And I think we've escaped that with ditching the Plumlee and the Greg Monroe contract. So I don't really want to go down that lane again. I think we should invest in a different position.
Yeah, I agree with you, Al. DeAndre Jordan on the Bucks with this current roster, especially when Jabari Parker comes back, it's a nice pipe dream, but in reality, I don't think it wouldn't make sense for the Bucks to do this. First of all, they would have to part with either Chris Middleton, John Henson, who I'm okay with parting, and Malcolm Brogdon, who I'm on the fence of giving him up. So you're going to give up important assets, and it's no guarantee that DeAndre Jordan re-signs with the Bucks after this season. So you could be in a situation where you dump those assets, and you also have the impending contract of Jabari Parker and DeAndre Jordan, and it just wouldn't make sense. You can't afford the two. So I just also think for cap space, this is just overblown.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys for sure. I would say the only reason why I would guess it would make sense is that you get to dump most likely Teletovic or Henson's contract. But I don't think Henson's been playing that bad where I mean, like, he's not necessarily our center but of the future, but I think right now he's doing a serviceable job. And I think he was played really well in Portland because when we took everyone out as the game was starting to get away, once Henson came back in, it seemed like things kind of came back to life.
Yeah, I'm with both of you guys, and just it doesn't really make sense to invest in the center position. Like if I want to do something at the center position, which I think I probably do, just with how inconsistent Thon and Henson are, I think I would just go with a minimum guy. If you got to wait till buyout season in February after the trade deadline, that's fine with me. I just don't think it makes sense to put big assets into getting a center. The other night they played without a center for a while and they really did fine. So
Well, if it's not a center that we need, what would I mean, I guess you could say we can get a minimum guy a little more as the season goes along. But what's another position you think we can need? I think a shooter, just like a straight up shooter. And I don't think that's really news to anyone, but I mean, who would you say?
Yeah, I agree with you for sure. The Bucks need a shooter. Their bench is just totally depleted. They're out Teletovic and Dellavedova, who at this point, we're kind of begging them to come back. They definitely need a shooter that can come off the bench. I think that DeAndre Liggins' honeymoon is sort of over, although he plays good defense. It's just his inability to really, do anything on offense really does kill the bench. And I think the Bucks are scoring the third least amount of bench points in the NBA, like at 23. It's just pretty embarrassing.
yeah, I guess maybe another Clipper guy could potentially be a target, and somebody like Lou Williams, who would literally just give you points off the bench, because I think that's kind of what people want Brogdon to do. They thought he would be more efficient and kind of help carry the bench, and he really hasn't been excelling in that role. I think Parker makes a lot of these problems go away, assuming he comes off the bench for a little bit when he comes back, just because then you got a bucket getter on the bench. But I think they could use a lot of things right now. A third center, a shooter.
Yeah,
Sometimes it seems like they don't have enough defenders either, but I don't really know how you fix that when you already have a guy in your roster like DeAndre Liggins, who's literally supposed to just be a defender.
and it's whenever DeAndre Liggins gets the ball where I get he doesn't know what to do. He's like literally in no man's land anytime he gets the ball, and he really has been. I mean, he plays good defense, obviously, and you don't really notice it all the time. But I mean, it's not been outstanding by any means. But you're also talking about a guy that's not really huge in contract. You don't really have a commitment towards him, and anything he gives you is gravy. But I saw some talk on Twitter possibly about Jabari on the bench, and I think that does make sense when he comes back, because if Jabari comes back, he's not that great at defense, and our offense or our starting five is pretty good at defense. So I think it's kind of a match made in heaven with how good of a scorer he is, or he was and should be, with how good the defensive unit is and the bench unit.
Yeah, Jabari will definitely help with the spacing, being a perimeter threat, and he could also get to the rim at will. So having him back, presumably off the bench, the Bucks are going to want to ease him in, coming off his second ACL surgery. So I think that definitely will help. I do agree with you on that aspect.
And then going more into the defense, because we all watched the Boston game, and the first half was not quite what we saw again in the earlier on the West Road trip, especially against Portland. What are your guys' opinions about kind of the defense and not kind of straying away from the strategy that was so successful on the West Coast trip?
I guess in a word, it's not great. Oh wait, that's two words. I don't know. It's just really confusing at this point what Jason Kidd is trying to do on defense. It seemed like against Boston we were switching kind of schemes and plans by the quarter, but you don't really trust Jason Kidd to make in-game adjustments that would actually be fruitful. You kind of expect him to just kind of go with the same thing for the entire game, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Uh, I think it's kind of obvious at this point that they don't know what they're doing on defense. It seems like whenever they seem to fix one of their problems, a new one opens. They're either giving up too many threes, they're fouling too much, or they're giving up too many shots at the rim. Sometimes it's two of the three, and sometimes it's only one of the three. Uh, they looked really great on defense when they played the Kings twice, and the Blazers kind of had an off night. And I don't know how much of that is the Bucks defense or how much of that is the fact that the Kings are not a very good basketball team.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not going to be playing the Kings for all 82 games. You know, that would be nice.
Yeah.
But yesterday, what really caught my eye is how many open buckets the Celtics were getting in the paint. It was wild, you know? There was a few possessions, three straight in the fourth quarter, where Marcus Smart would ask for a screen. The Bucks would trap him aggressively, and that would lead to a wide open Al Horford for an alley-oop. Every time.
You're right. And I mean, the Bucks did have a chance at the end, almost single-handedly on Giannis's behalf. But you look back at the whole totality of the game, you have a better first half defensively. You're probably right there with a better chance to win that you had.
And I don't think there's any shame in losing to the Celtics. Like,
No.
I actually thought a lot of people were overreacting to last night's game. Like, yeah, they had a really bad defensive first quarter, but that happens to teams all the time. You know, the Wizards lost by like 45 the other night, and I still think the Wizards are going to be a top 4 team in the NBA, or in the Eastern Conference, not in the NBA. But it just happens, you know. I think people got to kind of chill from a game-to-game thing and really look for bigger trends than a 48-minute sample.
Yeah, definitely. What's really annoying, Al, you touched on this, is the fact that Jason Kidd doesn't really adapt as the game goes on. We've seen that this season. Brad Stevens, perfect example. In all three of the games that the Bucks played against the Celtics, he's rolled out a different scheme, tailoring to what the Bucks do on offense and what's their strength. And every time, you know, he's been pretty successful. Brad Stevens, one of the best coaches in the NBA, of course. And that's what really separates a good team from a great team is the coaching staff and their ability to adapt as the season goes on.
Yeah, and we were brought to notice by Jason Kidd's press conference at the end of the game as he went with his infinite book of cliches, which is seemingly stuck on one page on the effort and energy section of it. And me personally am, and I know how Andrew feels about this, is a little tired of just flat out not answering the questions about what's really going on defensively. If it's really effort and energy, then that's a direct look at you. If your players aren't coming out every night, that's the coach. But I don't think that's it. Do you guys?
No, I think it's more complicated than that. And I don't know if it's just kids giving a cop-out answer each night, because I hope he doesn't actually perceive it to just be effort and energy. I hope he's just saying effort and energy in an effort to get the press conference done as quickly as possible. Because if he truly believes that it's effort and energy related, that's him. That's his fault. Sometimes, every once in a while, you can get away with it not being your fault, because we've seen the Spurs, we've seen the very well coached teams come out with lackluster effort at times. But this is like a young team. They're supposed to be hungry. They're supposed to have effort and energy. So the fact that that's so frequently what he says is a little concerning. I don't know if he'll ever be honest about the defense, because I don't think that's really a smart coaching move to do. But I don't know what's going to change. So, some nights it does seem like it is an effort and energy thing to me, but I don't really know how you change the effort and energy if you can't get consistent effort and energy from 22, 23, and 24-year-olds. Who are you going to get it from?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the energy and effort, it's just getting tired, and we're not even, you know, halfway done with the season. So I wonder how much, you know, they can take. But at the same time, you know, there's no excuse for this Bucks team to underachieve. Look at their roster. The roster's tailored with studs, you know. There's really absolutely no excuse for the Bucks to be underachieving. And, you know, the Bucks defense excelled in Jason Kidd's first year in Milwaukee. But if you look at their metrics since then, you know, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So it's almost regressing at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important to talk about that it is still early in the season, and we did play really pretty well on the West road trip, and we did just play against Boston, who isn't a joke. They are a really good team, top to bottom. Their bench taught our bench how to be a bench last night, to be honest with you, and I think it really shows that good leadership. And the thing is that I don't think we're that much less talented than the Celtics. I mean, other than a couple of key bench guys, I think we're right there with them talent-wise.
I agree with you on that, but the thing that separates them is they have Brad Stevens and we have
Exactly.
Jason Kidd, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that he's underperforming. I understand you got to have to. Boston has more veterans. I will give him that. Al Horford and Kyrie. I mean, he's definitely had a cup of tea in the NBA and had a bunch of experiences. But I don't know, Al.
I think it's a little complicated. Like right now we're a game and a half back of the fourth seed in Detroit. If we beat Detroit tomorrow, we're really right there with Philly and Detroit in that 4, 5, 6 range. We're in the sixth seed right now. So I think it's tough to say that the Bucks are truly underperforming at this point. I had Boston and Cleveland a big step above them, and the Hayward injury didn't really change that for me. So, like, personally, I think Boston has a much better roster. Granted, they start Jason Tatum. I really like Jason Tatum. He would have been in the mix for number one for me. The thing that's really complicated is that Stevens is always going to be a better coach than Jason Kidd. You don't grow that much as a coach once you've already started coaching. Like, Jason Kidd's 4 years into being an NBA head coach. He's not going to suddenly learn something about basketball. Stevens is just a genius, and I don't think we should hold Kidd to that standard, but I do think we could get a coach that at least gives us a punching chance at beating the Celtics as compared to what's going on now.
Well, here's where I'll argue with you on this point, that you're right. We are there with Detroit and Philadelphia for the 4 or 5. But I think the expectations were much higher for this season. We should be contending with Boston and Cleveland and Toronto, at least in the beginning of the season. That's what the Bucks were talking about, 50 wins, a playoff series. I mean, I think that we should be further ahead than Detroit, 14-9. Detroit's got decent pieces, but I guess I get it's all subjective. You can't really say, oh, well, they should be this good, they should be that good. The record is their record, but I don't see why we shouldn't be in the same category as Toronto and maybe even Cleveland. I mean, I guess Cleveland has that top-end talent, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a little bit too much of a Bucks fan here and not as much of an analyst, but that's what I think personally.
I just feel like we're seeing Detroit fall back to earth right now. They started 10-3, and since then they've been 4-6. I'm more interested in where we are 10 games in, because I think historically when teams are about 30 games into the season, that's a very good representation of how the standings look like at the end of the year. That's been the main argument in shortening the season, is that the extra games don't really help determine anything else. Personally, I think we're a big step below Boston and Cleveland. I think we're a step below the Wizards as well. I think the Wizards will end up above us, but I don't think there's any reason to think that we can't be the fourth seed in the East right now. And for me, that's where I had our expectations going in. I had Washington, Boston, and Cleveland a healthy step ahead of us. I think next year is kind of the year that we actually will be able to start competing with those teams. I think we need to get a little bit more out of Thon if we're really going to take that next step forward. The acquisition of Bledsoe pushed us a little bit closer, and maybe Jabari, upon his return, will push us even a little bit further than that. But there's still some holes on this roster, and they're still all so young that I'm not quite ready to say we're there yet.
Yeah, and the Bucks are just missing that spark. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Malcolm Brogdon coming off the bench? What's Teletovic going to do when he's back from knee surgery? What is Dellavedova's role going to be on this team?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the next question, because once Jabari comes back, our starting lineup is there, maybe barring a drastic change in the center position. But now it's really about rounding out that bench and filling specified roles for each guy. So as of right now, with the roster we have, is Brogdon that spark? Is Jabari, when he comes back, is that his role, a six-man? Well, I mean, go ahead.
I think for now, Brogdon definitely has to be that guy to really step it up until Jabari, Teletovic, and Dellavedova come back. Ever since the Bledsoe trade, you could tell it really took a toll on him immediately. He lost a really good close friend in Greg Monroe, and their court chemistry was unparalleled, So that definitely did take a hit on his confidence, shifting back to the bench, after winning Rookie of the Year. But he needs to adapt and get back to his bread and butter that he was playing like last year.
I think he's still kind of learning how to come off the bench. I think it's a really different role and kind of a reduced minutes load where we're not counting on him to be upwards near 40 minutes like we were at the beginning of the season. I think he needs to realize he can expend a lot more energy on defense. And I think if he kind of comes in off the bench and he sets the tone on defense and offense, we might be talking about an entirely different bench unit where everybody plays a little bit harder. And I think, while that's a little bit cliche and maybe naive to think that just bringing a little more effort can change that, we see it with Patrick Beverley that teammates play better around him because of how hard he tries on defense. And to an extent, Delhi does that, but Delhi isn't a good enough athlete to really set that tone.
Yeah, and I think the bench really needs those Delhi and Telly there, because looking at the minutes played last night, I mean, Don 8 minutes, Jason Terry 12, he's hurt now. DeAndre Liggins 12, and then Brogdon with 31. So long-term depth, I understand the Celtics are a pretty good team and you were coming back most of that time, kind of plays a factor into it. But Chris Middleton, 41 minutes. Giannis, 39 minutes. Tony Snell, 39 minutes. I mean, that's all good and well, but I think a little more bench play would kind of help that out a little bit. But it's trusting your bench guys. That's what it's really about. And do you trust Gary Payton, Rashard Vaughn, Balam Boy, and DJ Wilson? No, I wouldn't either. So yeah, I get your hands are tied here really until those two guys come back.
I don't really know what to say when people blame Jason Kidd for playing Giannis so many minutes. If Jason Kidd plays DJ Wilson enough to really give Giannis a break on the bench, the Bucks are getting blown out of every game. He's just not good enough to play NBA minutes right now, and he's the only other guy with really size to play Giannis's position, unless you're going to start playing Thon and Henson together, which I think is an even worse idea.
Yeah.
We should be 3 deep at power forward with Jabari, Teletovic, and Giannis, but Teletovic got hurt too early, so Jabari's not back yet. So it's just kind of a bad luck of injuries where your star player has to play more. And I think it could be worse. It could be your star player that's injured, and we're looking at playing those two guys a lot more minutes, which would be terrible. But I think people just got to wait. I think it might make sense if we can get a guy. I don't know who you would cut right now, if it would be Jason Terry or Rashad Vaughn. I think Rashad Vaughn would probably be your first choice because Terry gives you a little bit more. But there's not really, if you actually look at free agents available, there's a lot better list at center and the guard positions than there is at the backup forward spots.
Right. No, and that's right. There really is a lot of, I mean, there's serviceable centers and guards, let's say. And, you know, does Thon Maker only playing 8 minutes, like, does that tell you anything last night? Or is it just bad matchup? Because, I mean, he did get worked pretty bad against Al Horford in the opening couple games when he was in.
I think that my pin tweet on Twitter still is that Thon is going to have a breakout season where he becomes a household name. So I think I'm qualified to answer this. It's been a really rough season for Thon. You saw Jason Kidd try and use him in the mid-range to get some of his confidence back, but he's still really struggling, and teams are really kind of exploiting him as a matchup thing. And I think you could get past him being so weak if he positioned a little bit better on defense, but he's got so many deer in the headlights moments right now that you wonder if it's ever going to all come together. People have been raving about how smart Thon Maker is and how hard he works, but it's really just fluff at this point until he starts to show something on the court beyond the ability to hit an occasional three and the ability to run down the court. Because right now, I don't know what he's doing besides moving well, and he only moves well when he knows where to move, and he's not shooting well even. So it's really just moving well, and at this point, anybody can move well, right?
Yeah, you pinned it right on the head, Al. He's really been unplayable these last few weeks. Like you said, lots of deer in the headlight moments. He looks a step slower. So I wonder if it is that dreaded sophomore slump. You know, he did start playing basketball at a later age. So I guess you need to give him time and be patient. And at the same time, Jason Kidd really has no other choice but to play him because, who else are you going to play other than John Henson at the 5 and, of course, Giannis? Really don't have any other options here, so you have to ride it out until Jabari comes back,
I think you make a good point, though, Al, about positioning. He isn't the strongest guy on the court, but I can almost guarantee you, other than Giannis, he's the longest guy on the court. Start making some plays with your shot blocking. I mean, how many blocks? He's averaging less than a block a game.
Yeah.
What? That's what I'm saying. It's all about being like who you are. You know what I mean? Like, you can't make him be Dwight Howard, but if he's a long athlete like that and he can pin a couple shots against the backboard, then let's have him do that. Let's not try to make him be something that he's not, because it doesn't look like he's comfortable trying to be something that he's not, because it looks like we're trying to change him a lot and throw him in a lot of different spots. What is good that got him in the league? I understand, like, he's 7'1" and playing against a lot of younger kids. He looks great and it's all on potential, but he's a long shot blocker right now. He's not really – that's what I see him as. He can make some occasional mid-range shots, but he's not confident with it.
Yeah, for me, it's really tough because I'm not sure he's a good shot blocker. He doesn't really seem to have the instincts. Whenever he goes up for a contest, it seems like the ball's already going through the cylinder. So it seems like he's not a slow person, but it seems like he's slow to try and get in the air and block shots. And I don't know if he's still adjusting to the speed of the NBA game, but it's not really coming together. He never really had that great of a shot blocking performance in summer league either.
No.
Like, you could even compare him to somebody like DJ Wilson, who's an incredibly soft player, but DJ Wilson blocked like 12, maybe 14 shots in 5 games in summer league. He was actually kind of a beast in that department and averaged like a block and a half a game at Michigan.
Yeah.
I don't think that if you put Thon in a Power 6 conference right now, he would average a block and a half a game, which is kind of crazy for somebody with his physical tools.
Yeah, I mean, DJ Wilson is lanky smooth, so, I mean, you have to expect a couple blocks out of him.
It is only fitting, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a good follow on Instagram, too, and Twitter, I suppose. But
he's also a really good bench guy. He's always up there cheering, even when the Bucks are down.
If he keeps this hairstyle going, Alfred Payton may have a run for his money, because it is an interesting kind of get up he has. I cannot lie. I hope he does well with it, but I like it, I guess. All right. Well, that ends our Bucks segment for today. Once again, thanks, Al, for coming on. Al, you want to drop your social real fast?
Yeah, it's 39877. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, basically every social media platform at Junes for Shiz. I write about basketball. That's really what I love to write about, and that's what I love to talk about.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. And Al will be on more. Me and Al are working right now on a couple other podcasts for basketball, college basketball. So if you're interested in that, just let us know and hit us up on that. Andrew, do you want to go through with that Shepherd Express Minute real quick?
Yeah, so the Shepherd Express Minute brought to you by shepherdexpress.com. I don't know about you guys, but I love me some good Mexican food. And I read an article today on Shepherd Express about El Patron Mexican Food and Bar on 2423 South 6th Street. Head down there for a good, hearty, home-cooked Mexican meal. They offer generous-sized portions, so you're getting what you're paying for. And, I'm out here in LA, but I was looking at pictures on this article, and man, next time I'm in Milwaukee, I'm definitely checking out that place.
I don't know. With that roll of the R, they might be heading out to LA to see you. That was pretty good. I can't lie. You want to go through the games that we have for the rest of this week, I believe?
Yeah, so the Bucks are back in action tomorrow against the Detroit Pistons. I believe this is their 3rd matchup so far early in the season. And then Milwaukee welcomes the Dallas Mavericks on Friday. As we know, they demolished us in Dallas a few weeks ago.
Revenge.
And then let's hope. And then Milwaukee wraps up their week hosting the Utah Jazz, who also blew us out on the road. That was the infamous Giannis I'll F you up game.
Yep. Two big revenge games coming up this week, and hope Andre Drummond's worn out from talking crap with Joel Embiid. So I hope that's all good. And once again, thank you for listening to Cream City Cast. I'm Dylan Piccolo. You can reach me at Dylan Piccolo 35. You can read Andrew at Andrew Goodman and Andrew_Goodman 3 on Twitter. You can check me, Andrew, and Al's works at creamcitycentral.com. Once again, thank you to Shepherd Express for sponsoring us. And thank you, and go Bucks.